97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
My personality is I want to win badly. I want to win more Lombardis for Philadelphia and our fans. We got the greatest fans around, and I will do everything possible.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. There he is. He's ready to go. We are ready to go. We've got questions for him. We want answers. The people want answers. Geoff Mosher is here to provide them for us as the latest Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning. Actually, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. They're on their new schedule. So it's Monday, Thursday, 6 a.m. They'll have a new one out for you tomorrow morning. So in the meantime and in between time, Moshe, they have Football at 4 for all the news. Here we go. So how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
You sounded less enthusiastic than I did.
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Better. All right, let's get a couple thoughts from you. Let's talk about this guy Wentz and get a couple thoughts from you. All right, you
never heard of him.
You comfortable with that? I want to ask you this: should Howie Roseman trade Wentz to the Bears, irregardless of his thoughts about wanting to play in Chicago, or are the Bears saying if he don't want to play here, we don't want to make a trade?
I think B sounds more likely than A, right? I mean, you have a situation where Carson Wentz doesn't want to play for the Eagles and is clearly operating as such. So if he also does not want to play for the Bears, why are the Bears going to consider giving up a certain amount of compensation and wondering if they're just the next team that has to try to figure out a way to romance him back into wanting to be their quarterback, or in this case, into wanting to be their quarterback?
So I guess then that takes us to, and I figured that would be the answer. So does that take us down the road of the Eagles have only one team to talk to here?
I mean, certainly the signals that I have gotten and Adam Kaplan and what we've reported on Inside the Birds is that the Colts, for so many reasons, are the destination that people who we speak to around the league think makes sense. And we know that there has been a connection there, discussions there. So to me, yes, that still makes sense. I know that there have been, what I guess what you would call them is exploratory phone calls or discussions from other teams. But the Colts, to me, stand out, as they have from the beginning, as the most obvious and likely dance partner here.
We keep kind of going back and forth as the days go on, as leverage, who has more, less. The Colts in this situation, do you put any thought into they need a quarterback, and that in the end, it's either you take my quarterback or you stick with what you have, and that gives the Eagles some power here?
I think it's kind of an interesting situation where both teams have a weakness and both teams have a strength, right? The Colts need a quarterback, but the Eagles don't have, per se, a superfluous number of quarterbacks. They have a quarterback who does not want to play for them. So they're not in necessarily a position of strength either. And again, I think that's what makes this marriage kind of work well. And you just have two GMs who don't want to be the one to blink first, but eventually both parties have to kind of come to the idea here that they got to do some kind of work together and meet in the middle somehow. But again, like, the Colts may have a little bit more leverage in the fact that can they move on to a different quarterback option? It depends. We don't know how they feel about Sam Darnold. We don't know how they feel about Marcus Mariota. We don't know if they're able to pry Matt Ryan away from the Falcons, say if the Falcons wind up drafting a quarterback like Justin Fields. So I would say the Colts probably have good reason to be able to stick to their guns to this, whereas the Eagles really got to get rid of this guy by March 19th, or else they're saddled with even more money.
You just wonder if Frank Reich is saying, look what we have here. I know that he can get us to where we want to go. I'm not sure about these other guys.
Yeah, and that's possible. And I've said this for a while. I think that's why, to me, a conditional pick somewhere in this deal makes more sense to where, you give up something. And I'm not just saying that it's the only pick, but if Carson Wentz winds up being that guy that Frank Reich really believes can be the one, then the pick gets conveyed to either like a second round pick. It starts off as a conditional third or fourth. If he's not, if they're bad, then it just either stays to a third or goes to a fourth, something of that nature. But that, because of this kind of Jekyll and Hyde type of career that Carson Wentz has had, or really just a year, he had a really bad year compared to the rest of his career. It does leave a certain amount of risk on the table here in negotiations.
I know this question has been asked 10,000 different ways, but there's so much being added that if the Colts know Wentz isn't okay with going to Chicago, maybe the Bears pull the offer off the table. If Howie doesn't see a package that he's okay with, can we really see a situation where Carson Wentz is back here?
I don't see it, Hunter.
Okay.
I really don't. I just, imagine it yourself. I'm sure you guys have talked about what it would be like if Carson Wentz came back and had a bad quarter, let alone a bad game.
Maybe he's not even maybe it's more of like, hey, you're back here because we can't get compensation, but you're not playing. Like, it still hurts his team.
And can't Roseman put that in his pocket of like, look, you have Jacoby Brissett or Nick Easton. I have Wentz. You want what I have. I have his contract. He might want to be traded, but if I don't trade him, he has to. What's he going to do? Not play?
Well, I mean, guys who have made lesser money than Carson Wentz have done that, like Le'Veon Bell. I mean, Carson Wentz got paid a lot of money, and that could be the test to find out. But the big difference here is, Mike, is that, and even the big difference from Sam Bradford, where Howie could wait until an advantageous situation opened up where he could trade him to Minnesota, is that those guys are on 1-year deals. Carson is on a multi-year deal that's going to cost the Eagles a lot of money. Is it really worth the extra absorption to have him on the roster after March 19th just to be able to trade him for something a little bit better in August or September? I don't know. I'm not Howie Roseman, but he's got a lot of money that he's got to shave off the books here.
Yeah. Rob Monty the other day had said that one thing that the Eagles, that Carson's not a bad guy. He's not going to be a problem. So if he comes back, he might not be thrilled, but that he handled this situation. There is some precedence that if he doesn't win the job, he handled that pretty well, that he is a good person. Like, is that something
he'd honor the contract, essentially. Is what
he
was
wouldn't
saying.
be a problem, even though he might not be happy. He's not a malcontent.
Yeah, look, I saw that, and, I'll just give my own spin on it without, debating or even agreeing or contrasting Rob, is that, what in the last 3 weeks have made you feel like Carson Wentz is really going to honor his contract? I mean, he's had, I guess, a discussion with Nick Sirianni, but he has basically not talked publicly. We know he wants out. We know he doesn't have the same relationship with the team. It doesn't mean you're a bad guy when you're feeling that way, and it doesn't mean you're a bad guy if you just want a new environment. But I cannot see Carson Wentz kind of putting his tail between his legs, coming back, fighting for his starting job with Jalen Hurts, maybe not getting it, being on the bench. No, I think when you go to the extremes that he's gone through here, whether it's him or his camp or however you want to label it, and then when the team goes to the extreme of having his name out there in multiple trade conversations, then it's a done deal.
Yeah, and when you just mentioned not talking publicly, it sparked something that we were debating earlier in the show. Right now everyone's screaming that Carson Wentz should have said something by now, and I do fall in that camp, but I just wonder, if he did talk, and he did go to the media, not now, but I'm saying earlier throughout the process, and he was honest. I didn't have a great relationship with Doug, Howie, this and that. Don't you think that this city would destroy everything he said? If he went up there and talked, don't you think with how we're reacting now, we would have just did the same thing and nitpicked everything he said? It was almost like a lose-lose the way you look at it.
I do think that it's a lose-lose. I also think depending on what comes out of his mouth would depend on who's getting destroyed. If Carson Wentz did an interview, like a sit-down interview with someone, a half hour, and he outlined every single grievance he had, right? And talked about, the drafting of Jalen Hurts, if that's one, or Howie Roseman not putting enough guys around him, or him getting killed by an offensive line that never really got addressed while Jason Peters got all the money he asked for. don't you think people would then all of a sudden either be killing Carson Wentz or be killing Howie Roseman or killing Jeffrey Lurie or killing somebody? It's only going to stoke the flames. And I think that's where we get into the discussion of, well, Carson Wentz is not a bad guy. He's not trying to rake the Eagles under the coals any more than they already are. And they are being raked under the coals for this, as is he. So I don't think he's trying to add that to him or anybody else.
Well, would you suggest or say that Wentz and his team have played this very well?
Yeah, I would. I mean, if he winds up getting traded to the Colts, which is where I think he'll wind up going, I think he's going to be in a really good situation. He's going to have his money. He's going to have a great offensive line. He's going to have the coaches that he has liked to deal with in the past, and he's going to, have a very good GM in Chris Ballard and an opportunity to get back to the playoffs. I mean, compare that to going to maybe the Bears, where everybody is, fighting for their jobs and they don't have a great offensive line and they might lose Allen Robinson. That's not a good environment. That doesn't mean, though, that Carson's going to snap his fingers and become a, Pro Bowl quarterback again, but I certainly think that he'll have gotten what he wanted out of it.
Does it tell you anything about the stubbornness of Carson Wentz or the hard-to-coach angle that Frank Reich, Press Taylor, DeFilippo, they want their hands on him again?
You're asking me if the fact that Reich and
I just imagine if this guy's so hard to work with, if he's that uncoachable, if he's that much of a pain in the ass, why would they want him back?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, again, I don't have information on the Bears, whether they're in or out at this point, and whether or not their decision is based on the fact that Carson doesn't want to be there, or that their own evaluations are that it's not worth the first round pick. So I'll only, I think for the Colts, though, look, there's quarterbacks who have kind of fickle personalities, and it's not definitely going to work just because he goes to the Colts. It's just the best environment. And I do think, to your stubborn and hard-headed point, yeah, there's something to that. I mean, that's been the deal with him since he got to the Eagles, and they knew about that. So, yeah, it's there. The thing is, they've been able to win, right? They were able to win despite the fact that he might not love checking the ball down, despite the fact that he might like certain plays over the others. They were able to win for a little while, and then it became a point where they couldn't win, and he regressed. So we'll see if the next team has the ability to navigate his hard-headedness, but also still be able to win.
Interesting. Geoff Mosher, Football for powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which drops tomorrow. Now, Carson has not said anything. So do you think that people are just assuming that he wants to be traded?
No, that I don't think is the case. I mean, I think that, when reporters like Adam and I do our homework and we talk to the right people, we get the sense that he would like to be removed and divorced from this organization. I don't think that part is being
has there been a formal request from him or his agent to the team, or is it just assumed? Like in the Deshaun Watson situation, he has formally said, I want to be traded. I do not want to be here anymore. We have not heard that specifically or formally from the Wentz side. We're just going off of reports like you, Adam, and, by the way, many others. It's not just like you're being the one snide guy out there. Like, there's essentially everybody believes that. But where Watson was a lot more formal, like, hey, I want to be traded, Wentz nor his team has ever come out. So I'm just saying, are we just assuming he wants to be traded?
Yeah, no, I mean, you make a good point about the different context between how Deshaun Watson and others, like Carson Palmer, remember how, he wanted out. He wanted out of the Bengals, and he made that clear. And, we can go through the history of sports. Like, go all the way back to, Patrick Waugh. Remember when he got traded to the Avalanche, right? I think he had an awful game with he was with the Canadians, right, Hunter? Right? You're the hockey guy.
Look at this. You're throwing Patrick Waugh at us right now.
I just remember he had one of his games where he got yanked, and that was it. He was like, I'm done with you guys. I want out. And then next thing you know, he's traded to the Avalanche. But Carson has very much remained behind the scenes, but I don't think that we're assuming here. I think that the information that we're getting is accurate, that he wants to be moved to a different team.
That's a good pull there.
Yeah, I'm blown away that I never thought Patrick Waugh would be referenced today.
I think that's because it's the first time. This had to have happened early in the 90s, if I'm right. So I'm a kid. I'm in high school at that point. That's one of the first really big ESPN. Oh my God, a guy wants out. A guy of such magnitude wants out and forces himself to go to someone. I'm sure it happened before that as well.
Yeah,
but
Dominic Hasek.
Yeah, there you go, Hasek. Well, Hasek, that came after. That came after Patrick Waugh. But
Kelly
there have been many instances.
NHL at 4 is the new segment we're on today.
Earlier today, Zach Kiefer, who covers the Colts for The Athletic, had tweeted that it's been quiet, the talks have continued, but the Colts aren't budging. So I guess that kind of indicates that, yeah, the Colts side of things is also reporting that, there are talks here. But what does that say that the Colts aren't budging in this situation? Does that kind of indicate to you that they are basically like, this is what it is. If you don't like it, then go pound sand? Because Adam, Inside the Birds, your partner, Adam Kaplan, who will be on Friday, tweeted back at Zach saying, teams familiar with the situation, looking for a quarterback, continue to say the key is the Eagles getting a first-rounder. So is there a line of demarcation for the Eagles that they would just keep him?
Well, I just don't see that happening. I think in the end, here's what I was told.
Do you think they would buckle at some point?
Yeah, here's what I was told very recently by a very senior official with a team that's not the Eagles, not the Colts, but knows them both fairly well. And he suspects that a deal will get done.
No, that's not a good
You
time
gotta be
for this.
kidding me. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
how's that for a cliffhanger?
No, you think he did that on purpose?
No, but
I think he did that on purpose.
It's funny that he knew where he zoned out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it on the screen, and then I could see your guys' reactions when it happened, so I knew. But he said that he thinks the Eagles were asking for the 2 first-round picks. He had heard that early on, which was already out there. And he told me that knowing the Colts, they're not going to overpay, is what I was told. He does not think the Colts will overpay, and based on that, I'm guessing that the Colts would feel that even giving up a first-round pick is an overpayment. So we'll see what happens. You have a case. It's like the what do they call it? The immovable object versus the irresistible force here. Like, something's got to give at some point.
If they are to eventually trade Wentz, it's funny. We were talking about this yesterday. The NFL.com ranked all 59 starting quarterbacks from last year. Everybody who started a game. Hurts was the highest rated quarterback in the division, other than Prescott, who missed most of the year. So essentially, it's you have the best quarterback in the division coming back. If they're all the same starters, which is doubtful. But if they trade Wentz, what does that kind of indicate about the state of the team?
Glad you mentioned that. I wrote a column today on InsideTheBirds.com, really kind of examining what this all means. And, obviously, the point I made was obviously Carson Wentz lost his way this past year. He was not the quarterback or even close to what you would expect from Carson Wentz, even when Carson Wentz is struggling. This is nothing close to it. But I think the Eagles are struggling. I mean, they've lost their way a little bit too. If you go back to this time last year, right, when they're coming off of that 4-0 bottom 4, last 4 games, and they make the playoffs, Carson Wentz gets hurt. There's no way if you injected truth serum into all of them that they would tell you that they knew by the end of the next season that they would have fired Doug Peterson, revamped the whole coaching staff, traded Carson Wentz, started over, went into this kind of rebuild. There's no way they saw any of this coming. So while you may like or dislike or analyze some of these moves the Eagles have made in the last 6 weeks, all of this is not the blueprint that they had been laying out for the future. So in a way, the Eagles are not going down the path that they themselves plotted just a year ago at this time. So this is all new to them. And it does make you wonder. I mean, you lost the trust of a franchise quarterback for the first time ever. The Eagles used to be the team that told you, the fan and the media, when they were done with a star player, whether it was Brian Dawkins, whether it was Donovan McNabb, whether it was anybody else who was a very good player. They've never had a player of this caliber, in my recollection, say, you know what, maybe since Reggie White, which was for different reasons, but they haven't had a player like that say, I'm done with you. It's not me, it's you. And so this leaves them in a really kind of vulnerable spot. their franchise quarterback, their most visible player, doesn't want to be with them anymore. They haven't had very good drafts lately, so they need some of these guys from last year to really step up. They've got an entirely new coaching staff, none of which are experienced guys. They're all first-time coach, first-time defensive coordinator, first-time – I don't want to say first-time offensive coordinator because Steichen obviously did it last year, but it's not like he's been it for 5 or 6 years. So they're at a crossroads here, in my opinion, and you can say, well, hey, they've been able to rebound from stuff in the past and they'll do it again. Or I think you can rightfully be skeptical if they know what's going on right now because this all hit them like a ton of bricks.
There has been some noise lately about the Eagles possibly looking at a quarterback in the draft. And if they do, how do you specifically feel about Justin Fields?
Oh, man, I don't want to talk out of place. Like, I watch games like everybody, but I'm not a quarterback guru. So I think in the end of the day, when you're taking a guy like Justin, if you're taking anybody other than Trevor Lawrence here, then it's not just about that player, but it's about your coaching staff. It's about who he's surrounded with. It's about the player's work ethic, what they can learn in year one and then apply to year two. A lot of things have to go right. And so, look, he's a fantastic athlete. He's had some unbelievable games. He's played in the biggest stage. I don't think he's a guy who's I feel like he's probably more prepared for the NFL game than Dwayne Haskins was coming out, just because he's so much more athletic than Dwayne Haskins. But at the end of the day, it's all just you hope you have the right pieces in place if you do that.
Well, obviously, now what is your take on this March 19th date? Is that like if there's nothing done by then, does the whole thing change?
Well, yeah, I guess if nothing's done by then you really got to wonder, what's going on with. I mean, they've absorbed now even more money than they.
Well, what if they said to the Colts, if they said, well, we don't want to pay the $10 million, so we don't want to have him on our team, so would that happen?
Well, I mean that always factors into the compensation what you're taking on.
Correct.
Right?
So if the Eagles said, we'll take the $10 million if you give us better compensation. What would you rather have? The better compensation, pay the penalty, or less compensation, but you pay the penalty?
Right. And then you get back into these hypotheticals of leverage where the Colts have so much. The Colts are like $60 million under the cap. So there's no reason that $10 million should stand in the way of them making a move to even get the quarterback. So I highly doubt that that's even going to be an issue. If anything, what you can do, Mike, is you can work with Carson Wentz and his agents on adjusting that date in the contract so that they don't owe him that money at that point. And if Carson is willing to move the date a little later to make sure it accommodates a better trade or a better destination for him, then maybe he's willing to do that.
All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. New podcast drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., so you can check out more on this conversation and the latest. If anything new happens, they'll have it tomorrow morning at 6. Geoff and Adam. Adam will be here on Friday. Tomorrow, Andrew will be here. We can get Andrew's take on Justin Fields. I'm sure he is itching to talk more draft, and we will do that with him tomorrow on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Thank you, Geoff.
And have a great one, fellas.
All right, good stuff from Geoff Mosher, as always. And Football at 4 is brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from cosmetic surgery to skincare, go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back.